This is the Maserati Ghibli Trofeo, and it's got a bit of a point to prove. Now you see, the Germans are really good at making super saloons that are just at home on a racetrack as they are on the Autobahn. And Maserati's here to show that the Italians can do it too. Now the recipe is as follows: a Ferrari-derived V8 engine stuffed into its entry-level saloon, producing 580 horsepower, and a raft of chassis upgrades to make this a proper performance car. Can it live up to the likes of BMW M? Well, today we're going to find out. But before we go any further, if you like what you see, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Now I want to start straight away with the engine because it's the big differentiator between the other Ghiblis and the Trofeo. So instead of extracting more power out of the V6 that you get in the Ghibli S, Maserati has instead installed a twin-turbo V8 engine that you'll actually find in other Ferraris, as well as the Levante and Quattroporte Trofeos. Now, while the Ferraris come with a flat plane crank, this is actually a cross plane, so it sounds a little deeper and more burblier, but it's also smoother as well. Now in here, it's producing 580 horsepower and 730 Newton meters of torque. And unlike other M cars, power is sent to the rear axle exclusively rather than all four wheels. And that's all done through an 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox. Now 0 to 62 comes about in 4.3 seconds, which sounds extremely fast, but it's not quite as quick as what you get on the BMW M5 competition, which, when you line it all up with pricing, is this car's closest rival. Now that can do it in around 3 seconds flat, but again, it's worth bearing in mind that this is rear-wheel drive and not all-wheel drive, and all-wheel drive cars are faster off the line. And just look at the engine. While other cars come with plastic covers which ruin it all, this one has a beautiful carbon fiber one with the Maserati Trident, and also, because it's a Ferrari engine, it's got the Testarossa, or red head, to set it apart. Beautiful. With all that power going to the rear axles, some serious chassis improvements were needed, and there are many. First of all, we've got much bigger Brembo brakes than we find on the rest of the Ghibli range. The suspension is a little bit stiffer, and you also get a new adaptive damper system as well. Geometry has been improved too, and that should all add up to a considerably more driver-focused experience. However, it's quite heavy, with the Ghibli Trofeo weighing in at just under 2 tons, and it's not like Maserati has tried to bring that number down either. And speaking of not really bothering, Maserati hasn't really changed the way this thing looks at all, really, compared to a standard Ghibli, but there are some small things that set it apart from the rest of the range. So we've got some new vents in the bonnet. These are exclusive to the Trofeo. We've also got some carbon fiber highlights around here, and also a splitter at the base of the bumper. Moving a bit further around, these are new 21-inch wheels, and I think they look absolutely stunning. Maserati's signature triple vents down the side, now highlighted with these red flicks, and that's exclusive to the Trofeo, as is the Trofeo badge, although it's a pretty obvious one. Italian flag here on the B pillar, and now you've got the Maserati badge here, but it also comes with this red flick at the side too, and that is exclusive to the Trofeo. It's the new Trofeo badge. And at the back, well, it's all pretty standard fare, really. You get a quad exhaust system and a bit of carbon fiber down here. But other than that, it's not hugely different to the other Ghiblis. And while we expect something like an M car and an Audi RS car to have wider hips and more muscular arches, the Ghibli Trofeo is subtle, to say the least. The Trofeo sits at the top of the Ghibli lineup and is therefore priced accordingly at £105,000 before you start adding on some of the many options available. Now that makes it around 20 grand more expensive than the Ghibli Modena S, but crucially it's priced on a par with the Mercedes-AMG E63S and BMW M5 competition. And you can watch my review of the M5 by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. Of course, there are plenty of new and used deals to be found over at Yes Auto UK, so you don't have to pay full price if you don't want to. With a name like Trofeo, you'd expect it to scream motorsport on the inside here, whereas in reality, it feels much more like a Grand Tourer than a track special. This is a Maserati after all. But that means you get stunning leather seats with the Maserati Trofeo logo embroidered on the headrests, and it's also covering the dashboard and parts of the center console. That contrasts nicely with an Alcantara headliner, which gives it that performance car vibe. This car comes with optional gloss carbon fibre trim around the center console, and you get a carbon fibre plaque on the door sills with the Maserati logo. And rounding it all off is this gorgeous steering wheel with perforated leather around the grips that feels wonderful to hold, and behind that are two carbon fibre paddles to shift through the gears. Sure, it feels luxurious in here, but admittedly it doesn't really feel like a £100,000 car. And that's partly because there are elements in here that feel as though they've been ripped from Maserati's mass market sister companies. The switchgear, for instance, feels far too cheap and looks seriously outdated. You get two relatively dull analog dials with a basic TFT screen in the center, when most of Maserati's rivals have moved over to sharper, fully digital virtual cockpits. On the plus side, there's a new infotainment screen, which is really sharp and mostly responsive, although it can be a bit slow on the odd occasion. And though it may be an M5 rival, there's nowhere near the amount of leg and headroom for those in the back seats. Overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag in here. Yes, it's luxurious, and there is an element of Italian flair on the inside, but I think the Ghibli's German rivals do a better job when it comes to design and build quality. But the Trofeo is all about the drive, so it's time we went and took this out on the road. Before I drove the Ghibli Trofeo, I was expecting it to kind of tick all the performance car boxes of being very fast in a straight line, very composed, sounding pretty good, and being extremely stiff. But it's actually quite different to what I was expecting. And that's good, because we've got plenty to talk about. And the first thing I want to do is talk about the ride, which is a bit of a strange place to start. But I was expecting this to feel pretty much rock solid. Kind of a bit like an M car. When you get in an M car, you can feel every little groove and rut in the road. And while most of the time it makes you feel like you're in a really sporty, racy car, M cars can feel a little bit uncomfortable if you spend a lot of time with them. This thing though is very different. It's softer, more GT-ish. You know, I'm on a ridiculously bumpy road at the moment over some really bad bumps. We would be all over the place at the moment if we were in an M car, but in this Maserati, it's just soaking them up. And at low speeds, it feels pretty flat and planted. You know, I can make some turns on the wheel there and it's relatively quick to respond. But when we were doing that drifty, slidey stuff earlier for the B-roll, there is a lot of body lean in this car, even with the dampers active, and it feels much more like you're drifting a Rolls-Royce around rather than a super saloon. And how about that engine? Like I said earlier, it's a 3.8 litre twin-turbo V8 developed by Ferrari. While Ferraris are flat plane cranks, this is a cross plane, so it sounds a little bit different. So 580 horsepower all through the rear wheels, and it just makes the car feel like a bit of an animal, really. You know, I've got the traction control on at the moment for obvious reasons, but if you switch over from sport to Corsa mode, it switches a lot of the driver assistance off, and you're going to be sliding all over the place. And how about the noise? You can kind of tell that it's come out of a Ferrari, or that it's been fettled by Ferrari, because it doesn't sound like a mass-produced V8 when it starts up. There's a real aura to it that just screams supercar. That being said, it's actually quite quiet. Now, that's partly because the Maserati Ghibli Trofeo is still a Ghibli underneath, so it feels very much like a Grand Tourer, and you know, we've got leather everywhere and great noise isolation, but we also have double glazing on the windows, so it's actually quite hard to get some of that engine and exhaust sound to come in. And you know what, I think it actually feels a bit more involving compared to an M5, because that M5 with its X-Drive all-wheel drive system means that you can put the power down and it almost acts like an electric car. It just goes. In fact, it feels punchier than an electric car. Whereas this thing, because it's rear-wheel drive, it kind of squats down a little bit when you put the power down. And even if you've got the traction control on, it still needs a minute to figure everything out. You know, it's putting 730 Newton meters of torque and 580 horsepower to the ground. So it's got a lot to think about, and so you kind of feel like you need to manage it with your right foot, particularly if you put it in Corsa mode. And so it doesn't have that motorsport feel like an M5 does, but you have an element of involvement because it's a little bit more basic. It's not the best steering system I've come across in a car. There's weight to it, but it kind of weights up a little bit strangely. Like if I go from side to side like that, it kind of feels a little bit loose the more you turn. So you've got quite a lot of weight in the center, and then it feels like it becomes looser the more lock you put on, which almost feels a bit counterintuitive really. It seems a bit strange. And it's not quite as fast as what you'd get in something like an M5 or an E63S. It's quite a difficult car to sum up, this Ghibli Trofeo, because the name makes you think that it's going to be a really performance-focused car. And I kind of think that's what Maserati wants you to think. But instead, you've got something that is very fast, very relaxing, and really does feel like a supercar experience with 4 doors, particularly with that engine under the bonnet. My goodness, it's a really special motor. I think really, Maserati has almost hit the nail on the head, because if it wanted something that was really track focused, it would probably lose against the BMW M5 competition, which does a very good job of being track focused. And if it wanted a blunt instrument that was ultra fast in a straight line, then look no farther than an E63S. So it's not the most refined experience, but it's definitely different to anything else that it's going up against. And if you want to just have a little bit of fun and have a supercar that can take 4 other people along with you, then maybe give the Ghibli Trofeo a go. So, the Ghibli Trofeo, it's not really what I was expecting. I came into this thinking that it would be a proper 4-door driver's car, but instead what we've got is a luxury-ish GT, which is very comfortable, but also has the engine of a supercar. So it's not a cruise missile like an E63S, nor is it a track-honed weapon like the M5 competition, but it is a proper old-school 4-door super saloon. And remember, you can check out more car news and reviews by heading over to yesauto.co.uk.